Hello everyone, my name is Snehaaigali, student of Sri Venkateshwar College of Engineering, Bangalore. Currently, I am pursuing my bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering. Well, today I am up with the subject called database management system, in which I'll be particularly talking about the SQL data definition and some of the data types. Then we'll be heading up with schema change statements in SQL, then specifying constraints in SQL. So let's begin. First up, we have introduction to SQL data definition. So what actually SQL data definition is? SQL data definition, it is used to define the structure of database, which includes tables, columns, and relationships. Then next up, we have the data types in SQL. What all data types are present in SQL? Data types in SQL are the one which specify the type of data that can be stored in the columns, as we have mentioned in the data definition language, which include like rows, columns, and relationships. So those rows, columns have some data types which can be stored in columns, such as in the data types which can be stored in columns are integers, strings, dates, and more. Understanding data types is crucial for designing efficient and accurate database. Here in the image, you can see some of the data types along with the description. Some of them would be Boolean, which means like true or false. Then we have character data type, which has a fixed length string. Example, char of 10. Then we have varchar, which means variable length string. Example, varchar of 50. It is nothing but the syntax, that is varchar of 50. And then next we have bit, numeric or decimal, integer. Then we have small int, float or real, double, precision. Then we have date, time, timestamp, interval, followed by character, that is large object, then binary large object. Now next up in data definition in DBMS is common data types in SQL. So what are the common data types which are used in MySQL? Some common data types in SQL include int for integers, that is, integers is specified as int in while writing the code in SQL. Then varchar is for variable length string, as we have seen in the previous slide. Then date is used for addressing the dates, and Boolean for true or false values. Then choosing the correct data types for each column is important for ensuring data integrity and optimizing storage. SQL also supports more specialized data like BLOB for binary large objects and JSON for storing JSON data. Now, next up, we have change statements in SQL. What all are the schema change statements that we find in SQL? Schema change statements in SQL are used to modify the structure of database, such as which we have adding or removing tables, then adding or removing the columns or constraints. Common schema change statements include the alter table for modifying the existing tables. Especially alter table is used when we have to correct the table or add any columns to the table, or we want to delete some columns from the table, etc. Then create table for creating new tables. Then we have drop table for deleting the tables. It is important to carefully plan and execute the schema changes to avoid data loss or corruption. The next step is adding columns into SQL. To add a new column to an existing table in the SQL, as I mentioned previously, we can use the alter table statement, which is followed by add column clause. Specify the column name, like how it is written, we will be seeing now. That is, we should specify the column name followed by the data type and any constraints on the new column, such as not null or default values. It is optional. And then adding columns can be useful for incorporating new data into your database or enhancing the existing data models. In this, we are specifying for what purpose we need this alter statement. It is used for adding new columns so that we can specify more amount of data into data table. The next step is dropping columns in SQL, which means deleting columns from SQL. To remove a column from SQL or to remove a column from a table in SQL, use the alter statement with the drop column clause, which is followed by the column name. Then, dropping columns should be done with the caution as it can result in data loss if not managed properly. That is, before using this drop column option, you must be sure that the columns which have been selected are to be dropped, because when drop column takes place, the data loss happens. That is, your data gets deleted, which will be quite complex to retrieve back if needed again. Then, considering backing up your data before dropping columns to prevent accidental loss of important information. The code for that is given in the side figure. Then, specifying constraints in SQL. Constraints in SQL are nothing but the rules that enforce data integrity and ensure the accuracy and consistency of data in our database. Common constraints, which include the primary key. Primary key is used to uniquely identify the rows from the column. Then foreign key for relation between the tables, and like foreign key is used for connecting two different tables, and check for custom validation rules. By specifying the constraints in MySQL, you can prevent invalid data from being inserted or updated into your data. Some of the MySQL constraints are given in the image, which are not null, check, unique, primary key, foreign key, and default constraints. Now, next up, we have creating primary key in SQL. How do you create a primary key in SQL? Before that, first, what is the primary key? A primary key is a unique identifier for each row in a table. Typically, it is used to ensure data integrity and facilitate efficient data retrieval. To create a primary key in SQL, use the primary key constraint on one or more columns in a table. Primary key can be a single column or composite value that consists of multiple columns to uniquely identify each row. Here we have an example. See, look at this. Here where author ID can be taken as a primary key. If you want, then you can even take book ID as primary key from the other table. Yeah. Now, next up, we have defining a foreign key in SQL. Foreign keys in SQL establish relationships between tables by referencing the primary key of another table. To define a foreign key, use the foreign key constraint on a column that references the primary key of another table. Foreign keys help maintain data consistency and they enforce the referential integrity in the relational database. Now, next up, we have enforcing data validation with the check constraint. The check constraint in SQL allows you to define custom validation rules for the data in column. As we have seen it previously, it is used to allow you to define a custom validation rules for the data in a column, ensuring that only valid values are allowed. Use the check constraint to specify conditions that must be met for data to be inserted or to be updated into your columns. Check constraints are useful for enforcing business rules. It is useful for data validation and also for ensuring data quality in your database. So those were all about some of the constraints, data types, and what actually DBMS was. So we have reached to the conclusion. So what we can conclude from this session is SQL data definition and data types are essential for designing an effective database that meets the needs of your organization. Schema changes statements enable you to modify the structure of your database as requirements evolve. Specifying constraints in SQL helps maintain the data integrity and enforce the rules that ensure the accuracy and consistency of your data. Well, guys, that was all about the database management system and how the things work in SQL. I hope this might help you guys. Thank you.